This week in history.
Three, two, one, zero, and liftoff.
Discovery, go and throttle up.
All right, Johnny. So this is a special because this is kind of a half week. It's half June, half July
Yeah.
when we're recording this. So it's my
Is
special.
it June week 5 or July week 1? Who can say?
Well, it's my special. I only have one thing, Johnny, and even with that, it might be more than a 10-minute episode because that's going to be a rant. But it's America. It's the only thing that's important. The only thing that happens at the beginning of July, Johnny. Our
Freedom!
Independence Day! Woo!
Freedom, baby! That's how we
Freedom,
do it.
bitches! Screw you, King of England! Woo!
Boom, boom! Fireworks in the air.
America! Get drunk and shoot guns. Which, ironically, is exactly what the Founding Fathers intended, which is great. Clearly, it's the only thing that we need to talk about this week. And the reason why it's going to take a whole episode is because I've got some rants. So we celebrate our
Wait.
independence.
Are you telling me you're going to be mad at the 4th of July?
I'm
You're
not,
going to rant?
I am
about the
not
4th of
mad
July?
at American independence. I am mad at when we celebrate the damn American independence.
Why do you hate freedom, Tommy?
I don't hate, damn it, Johnny, I don't hate.
starting
I
to
love-
sound like you might hate freedom.
I love freedom, but I want people to know when and why we should be celebrating our freedoms
All right,
So
enlighten
celebrate
us,
it
Tommy.
on July 4th because that's apparently when we think the Declaration of Independence was signed.
So it's kind of like we celebrate Christmas on December 25th because that's when we think Jesus was born.
That's
Even though
the
it's probably not
arbitrary
even
date.
close.
Oh no, we know it's not close. But
Yeah.
anyways, that's another. We'll do
The
that
same
for a
thing.
Christmas episode.
Same thing. So it was not signed on the 4th of July?
So we'll go back to the start. So July 2nd, 1776,
Yeah.
the Continental Congress votes on Richard Henry Lee's. Yes, that's Richard Henry Lee, Johnny. The Lee family is very strong as Americans, and it's the grandfather of Robert E. Lee.
Okay, so that's what you're implying, that I would know that Henry
Lee was?
Lee is the grandfather of...
Well, I just saw you'd hear Lee and be like, "It's Lee." Everybody knows Lee.
I mean, Lee's a fairly common last name.
Well, and it's a very, very, very popular name in Virginia.
yeah.
Virginia. Anyways, he proposed a resolution that, and I quote, that these united colonies are, and right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiances to the British crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is, and ought to be, totally dissolved. That was the resolution.
Okay. That sounds to me like they didn't want to pay money back to England. And they're like, we're going to absolve all our debts because now we're free. Is that... Yeah?
I mean,
Little bit.
in a very short nutshell, the reason why the American people revolted against England was because, well, England wanted to make us pay for the French and Indian Wars, and we said, no, we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
That's essentially what it all boils down
And so we need to absolve all the debts between us and them and be free. And why not?
Well, the Continental Congress votes on July 2nd, and they vote, damn it, we're independent.
Well, hell yeah, we don't want to pay either.
So July 2nd, we have a vote, and we vote independence.
Great.
On July 2nd.
Mm-hmm.
So on July 2nd, as it passes, John Adams himself writes a letter back home to his wife. And he says, and I quote, July 2nd will be the most memorable in the history of the great anniversary festival. It ought to be solemnized with pomp and parade, with shoes, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations from one end of this continent to the other forevermore.
So he's the reason for fireworks.
He is, and he's right. We do that today on
Yeah.
July 4th. We celebrate all of those things that he said we were going to
Do
celebrate.
you suppose it's because 2nd of July just doesn't quite sound as good?
Born
as-
on the
4th of
2nd
July?
of July. Oh, it doesn't work.
It just doesn't.
Yeah.
Second is not a great word.
Well, Johnny, so
Fourth
why do we celebrate
It's
it on
strong
the 4th?
in
right?
one syllable.
Yeah, maybe. So why do we celebrate it on the 4th? Well, after the vote goes through, Congress decides that maybe we need a reason to explain to the people of these colonies why we voted for them, even though we weren't elected, to secede from Great Britain.
So
We
so
need-
maybe we need to explain why
need to-
we're like, oh, F you, Britain, we're on our own now. And they're like, guys, but we maybe wanted to stick around and get the benefits still. And they're like, no, we said no because they wanted our money.
So they have a 5-man panel to compose a draft of a document to explain to the people what the hell's going on. They chose John Adams, Roger Sherman, Robert Livingston, Benjamin Franklin, and finally the Thomas Jefferson.
The
Thomas
is
Jefferson.
he like at what is he, Ohio State University? Why does he
He
get
is, yeah, he
the
is the
in front of
Thomas
his name
Jefferson.
and nobody else does?
Well, because like any group project that you've ever been assigned through either high school or college, you know that there is one guy, the guy
okay.
who does all the work, while everybody else sits around and just nitpicks just shit out of what he's doing
Gotcha.
while he does all the work.
And so that's
exactly what
the
happens. Thomas Jefferson writes
Gotcha.
a proposed Declaration of Independence. He gives it to said panel. They go, we don't like it. So he writes another one and gives it to said panel.
So
Like,
what
we
the
don't
fuck?
like it.
Then you write something. You put something into it. No. I don't like that one. Bring me another one.
After 2 days of writing back and forth and bitching and back and forth, they finally have the Declaration of Independence that they propose to Congress on July 4th, where it is approved.
Boom!
And-
There you go. That's why, Tommy. Come on.
Except there's that whole
No, stop your
image
research
of,
there, and that's why accept it. Use your brainwashed brain to continue to be brainwashed, and just accept it and move on.
why would we, but even if that's the case, so let's say hypothetically speaking that everybody in the Congress signed the document on July 4th when it was approved. They didn't, but let's say they did. Why do we celebrate it on July 4th? It still makes no sense. We declared our independence on the 2nd. Why are we celebrating the day that we created a document to explain why we voted the way we voted on the 2nd? It would be like, instead of celebrating when the Supreme Court makes a ruling on something on that day, like Roe versus Wade, instead of celebrating when they made that ruling, we celebrate when they came out with their like reason for the announcement of why they ruled that way.
Yeah, so you know what this
Doesn't make
is, Tommy?
sense.
You know what this is? This is a college student walking at graduation day without finishing their senior thesis. They're close to it. They almost have it. And they're like, all right, we'll let you walk, but you got to get it to us in the next week.
You know, I might even equate it to like maybe like when we declared our independence, that was like the conception of the baby, but we don't celebrate the birthday till the baby's born.
There you
But
go.
if that's the case, then why don't we celebrate Independence Day when we actually win our independence from Great Britain through the war? Let me get there. So, in any case, on July 4th, the document is approved. It is then sent to printer John Dunlop, where 200 copies were printed, and John Hancock's name appears at the bottom of these documents. Because actually, the very first copies of the document, it was John Hancock who signed it.
That's why we have the John Hancock as a signature.
Big ass John Hancock.
thing,
Well, and,
yeah.
and his name
And
is
it
the
was-
biggest on it because, like an asshole, he goes, "This is where all the people are going to sign." And he goes, "Okay,
I'll sign over all that.
26 of these original copies do still exist today. It's kind of impressive, actually.
That's
think about
wild,
it.
yeah.
But unlike the history book painting where we see where all the members of Congress gather around on July 4th to sign it, didn't happen.
Are you telling me history books lie to us, Tommy?
They sure as shit did.
What?
In fact, these signatures were scattered from July 4th all the way out to 1777. The last
I'll get
signature-
to it eventually. All
that
right,
is
it's been
on
on
the-
my desk for a week. I
The
don't know what
last
to do with
signature
it.
on the Declaration of Independence, I think, happens in August 1777.
August of 17.
A year and a half, like a year and a month
A
too
year,
later.
yeah, 13 months later. Thanks, pal.
The first public reading of the Declaration of Independence doesn't happen until July 8th in Philadelphia. George Washington.
1776, though, right?
1776, yeah, 1776.
So just a week later after the
A couple days later.
initial.
George Washington himself, the commander-in-chief of our entire armed forces that are fighting against Britain, because what we also do a shit job of teaching in history is that, yeah, the war didn't start with a Declaration of Independence. We'd been fighting that for a long while. New York had already been taken over by the British. Like, the war is going on. George Washington is the head of the Continental army. Like it's already fighting before we even declared independence. There's already a war going on,
Yeah, this is news to me. See,
right?
I
Because we do a shit job of
I
keeping it.
understood that we signed the Declaration of Independence, and then England was like, "All right, bitches, that's war." But
Nope, we're
apparently
already
not the
at
case.
war.
They were already like, "All right, bitches, we're gonna start taking you over," and then we're like, "We don't like that independence," and now we'll fight you.
Yep.
So that's
George
what that
Washington
was the
himself,
actual.
the head of the army, the guy that you probably want to know, like that he needs to kind of know what's going on with the government, what's going on, right? Like if peace
Yeah.
gets declared or if war gets declared, he might want to know because he's actively fighting the British right now. He doesn't learn
Right.
about it until July 9th. So again, the 4th, it makes no sense. It's an arbitrary date. England itself didn't learn about the Declaration until August 30th, 1776, when the boat finally got over there with a copy of said document. And it only had 2 names on it. It had John Hancock's name and Charles Thomas's name. They were the only 2 that were on it, and we teach this in high school all the time too. That everybody that signed the Declaration of Independence was at risk. Like if we lose the war, we're all going to get beheaded by the king because we treasoned.
Yeah.
No, there were only 2 names on it intentionally for that reason. Thomas Jefferson and Thomas agreed that we'll put our names on it because yes, we understand that this is treason, but it's fine. We'll send it.
We're willing to take that. The thing is, how are you going to care about 2 people when you're the king?
Well, King George himself didn't even publicly recognize receipt of the Declaration.
No, because why would he? Because
well,
he's
he did, but he doesn't recognize it until October 31st, 1776, when he has a speech in front of Parliament where he has to explain what's going on in the colonies, and he says, "Well,
I got a letter signed by 2 dudes, and I don't know, like what the.
Well, but we're still at war, and things aren't exactly like." That's the other thing we don't teach. Like, yes, England did do a good job of kicking the shit out of us from time to time, but we also did do a good job of kicking the shit out of them. Even early on in the war, we did do some good decisive battles.
Because again, when you just have to stay where you are, it's a lot easier than having to invade.
It sure as shit is. So on July 3rd, 1777, a year later.
Well, almost.
Okay, fine. A year later, Congress forgot that they declared independence on the 2nd. They're like, the whole Adams like, we'll never forget the 2nd. A year later, they forgot about the 2nd. There was actually a meeting in Philadelphia where they go, oh, shit, yeah, we did declare independence a year ago. Maybe we should do something. So that night, on the 3rd, at midnight into the 4th, they shot off 13 gunshots in salute of we declared independence a year ago.
So this is basically Dad who forgot to buy fireworks for the 4th of July, and his family's like, did you remember to buy the fireworks and bring us the entertainment to celebrate this nation's freedom? They're like, no.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, I totally remember to do that. And then he goes and just shoots a gun in the air.
So, and like American politicalness, Independence Day was politicized right from the get-go.
I mean, we do it with everything. We did it with wearing masks.
Yeah, we sure did. And we did it with Independence Day. And it wasn't widely celebrated at first because the Federalist Party and Thomas Jefferson's Republicans, not to be confused with Abraham Lincoln's Republicans, they're 2 different entities. And even the modern day Republican Party is not but that's beside the point.
That all switched later, and it's fine.
This Republican Party is not the same as today's Republican Party. Yeah. They couldn't agree on how to celebrate it or when to celebrate it or why to celebrate it. So celebrations weren't really started until 1812 after the Federalists have kind of dissolved and we have this whole new war thing going on with Britain.
1812?
1812.
That's damn near 30 years later.
And again, if you want to talk about independence, the whole conception thing where we voted for it, and the actuality or birth thing when the baby comes out, which would be when the Treaty of Paris is signed on September 3rd, 1783. Because again, we do a shit job in our history books to distinguish like how long the Revolutionary War was.
Oh yeah, no, I could not harbor a guess.
Well, even it was September 3rd, 1783 is when the Treaty of Paris is signed. But that's not even when the fighting stops, because the fighting stops earlier than that. But
so it's like 6-7 years.
Yeah,
Something
it's
like
it's a
that?
good well, and then when do you start the war? Do you start it with the first shots that are fired? You know, like way back with like Concord and Trenton. Like, do we go that? Do we go
Yeah.
to the Boston Massacre? Do we go to the Boston Tea Party? Like, when do you really officially start this war?
Sure.
So
Yeah.
it, it
When
there that
conflicts
whole
have been happening for so long.
that whole rise to the revolution, the war, and the end was like a good 20-year period. It was a, it's a
Yeah.
chunk of time. But in any case, the best I can gather with the 4th being celebrated is that John Adams and Thomas Jefferson both pass away on July 4th in 1826. It is
What?
after 1826 that Independence Days really started to be celebrated on July 4th. So what a weird coincidence that they both die on the same day and on July 4th.
Yeah, that's a bizarre coincidence, but that's kind of how we do a lot of things, isn't it? As far as our date celebrations go, because like President's Day, like is celebrated on somebody's birthday, right? I don't know whose, but it wasn't. We like, didn't we
Well,
pick a president
Yeah,
and celebrate
well,
his
it's supposed to be
birthday?
like Washington and Abraham Lincoln, and we celebrate, we move the birth. It's a weird.
Something
I
like
mean,
that.
if
But
you work
yeah,
in the
we've always
government,
kind of
you
just
really-
like picked arbitrary dates and like that's where we're gonna do it.
yeah, pretty much. But a letter that was written on July 2nd, mind you, July 2nd, 1826, by Thomas Jefferson himself, in reference to July 2nd, he wrote this letter, and I quote, "For ourselves, let the annual return of this day forever refresh our recollections of these rights and an undiminished devotion to them." God damn it, why do we celebrate 4th of July as the Independence Day? Even Thomas Jefferson, his last written words were talking about July 2nd, and we should be celebrating Independence Day on July fucking 2nd. It makes no goddamn sense.
You want to know why, Tommy? Go ahead
What?
and say for me, 2nd of July. And then say
know,
for me,
yeah,
4th of July.
I know, fine, whatever. It's bullshit. It's arbitrary.
You let me know which one sounds better. If you're gonna market just like a circle jerk about our nation's freedom, you want it to sound good. Because I mean that's basically what it is, right? Like we're just
Well,
all
yeah, and I
sitting
guess
around saying, "Hey,
Canadian-
we beat them Brits."
I guess
and we're gonna
Canadian independence is
light off
celebrated.
fireworks.
I guess Canadian independence is celebrated on July 1st, so we don't want to be the day after Canada, right?
Wait, when Canada has their
Yeah,
independence?
Canada's Day is today. Like, it's National Canadian Day. You've not been on Imgur today. You would have seen that all over the place.
Oh, I didn't even know Canada was independent.
Whether or not they're still, well, that's another story. And that's this week in history.
And that's this week in history.